I always loved October. Golden leaves, crisp air, pumpkin spice lattes, and the anticipation of Halloween. But October 2016 forever changed my relationship with this month, and especially with clowns. My name is Alexa Martin. I'm 22 years old. I work part-time at a small art gallery in downtown while finishing my degree. The job is perfect for a student, quiet, with flexible hours and the opportunity to do homework between rare visitors. That evening, I closed the gallery as usual. I checked all the rooms, turned off the lights, and activated the alarm. Then I stepped out onto the cool street. The city had already plunged into twilight. Streetlights cast yellowish light on sidewalks covered with fallen leaves. I put on my headphones, turned on my playlist, and headed to the Central Square subway station. Usually this station was busy, but by 9:30 p.m., the flow of passengers had decreased significantly. When I went down to the platform, there were only a few people. An elderly couple at the far end, a businessman with a briefcase, a guy in headphones buried in his phone. I checked the board. 4 minutes until my train. I leaned against a column and started browsing Instagram. Then I noticed a bright spot of color out of the corner of my eye. Looking up, I saw him for the first time. On the opposite platform stood a clown. Not an ordinary circus clown. Something from a nightmare horror movie. White makeup covered his face. A bright red smile stretched almost to his ears. His eyes were outlined in black, creating the impression of empty sockets. He wore a baggy costume with bright multicolored patches. In his hand, he held a single red balloon. At any other time, this might have seemed strange. But in October 2016, the entire country was experiencing the so-called clown hysteria. The news was filled with reports of people in clown costumes scaring passers-by. Most cases were just stupid pranks, but some incidents took on a threatening character. I rolled my eyes and returned to my phone. Another idiot who decided to join the trendy movement, but something made me look up again. The clown wasn't moving. He just stood there, holding the balloon, and stared directly at me. A chill ran down my spine. I looked around to make sure he wasn't looking at someone behind me, but the column was at my back. I looked at the clown again. He slowly raised his hand and waved at me. At that moment, my train thundered into the station, blocking the view. When it stopped and the doors opened, I quickly got inside. I chose a seat from which I could see the opposite platform. The train stood for about a minute. All this time, I strained to peer through the window. The clown had disappeared. I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. He probably just went down the stairs or got on his train. Nothing strange. Just a coincidence that he was looking in my direction. All the way home, I convinced myself that this was just another case of clown hysteria. Nothing personal. Just some jerk who decided to scare people. My apartment was in an old brick building. A 15-minute walk from Park Avenue Station. A small studio on the 3rd floor. All I could afford on a gallery worker's salary and scholarship. Climbing the stairs, I mentally planned my evening. A hot shower, reheated pasta from yesterday's dinner, a couple of hours working on sketches for my painting course. But when I reached my door, all thoughts of a quiet evening evaporated. A red balloon was tied to the door handle. Exactly the same as the one the clown held at the station. I froze, unable to move. This couldn't be a coincidence. Had the clown seen me at the station and somehow found out where I live? Or was it someone else? Maybe a stupid prank by neighbors? Carefully, as if the balloon could explode at the touch, I untied it from the door handle. A small white card was attached to the string. With trembling fingers, I turned it over and read what was written in neat handwriting. The message said to smile. that someone was always watching, and it used my name. My name was there. I quickly looked around. The landing was empty, but it seemed to me that invisible eyes were watching me from every dark corner. With shaking hands, I inserted the key into the lock, ran into the apartment, slammed the door, locked all 3 locks. The balloon was still in my hand, swaying in the air like an ominous reminder. I opened the window and released it outside, watched it rise into the night sky and disappear into the darkness. I called my best friend Megan. She answered in a sleepy voice. I remembered that she had an early shift at the coffee shop tomorrow. I told her about the clown at the station and the balloon on the door. With each word, the story sounded less threatening and more ridiculous. Megan reminded me that idiots in clown costumes were now roaming all over the city. Red balloons were a classic from Stephen King's It. Most likely it was just a coincidence or someone's stupid joke. As for my name, I'd been living in this apartment for a year. Anyone could know my name. The mailman, neighbors, pizza delivery guys. Her rational explanations made sense. I took a shower, ate, even managed to work on sketches for about an hour before fatigue took over. Before bed, I checked all the locks again, put a baseball bat next to the bed, just in case. That night I dreamed of clowns. Dozens of clowns with white faces and red smiles, holding red balloons, whispering my name. I woke up several times in a cold sweat, peering into the darkness of the apartment, listening to every creak. In the morning, I felt broken, but in the light of day, yesterday's fears seemed exaggerated. I attributed everything to coincidence, decided not to think about it anymore. This mood lasted exactly until I left the house. On the steps in front of the entrance door lay another red balloon. I froze, looking down at it. It was tied to the railing with a thin white string, swaying in the light morning breeze. A card was attached to the string again. Looking around and seeing no one suspicious, I went down, took the card with trembling fingers. The message asked if I remembered him, said he remembered every one of my smiles. Goosebumps ran across my skin. This was no longer like a random joke. Someone was deliberately stalking me. Someone who, judging by the note, knew me personally. I took out my phone and photographed the balloon and note. Then I untied the balloon from the railing. Like yesterday's, I released it into the sky. I didn't want to touch the card more than necessary, but I still put it in my pocket. This could be evidence if the situation worsened. On the way to college, I mentally went through everyone who might have a motive to stalk me. Jason, my ex? Too straightforward for such games. Someone from my classmates? But why? I had no conflicts with any of them. Classes that day passed in a fog. I couldn't concentrate on lectures, constantly looked around, flinched at every loud sound. During lunch break, I showed Megan the photos of the notes. She admitted it was getting creepy, asked if I should go to the police. But what could I tell them? I had no proof that the same person was doing this. There were no direct threats, only strange messages. Megan noted that the messages were clearly personal. The question about remembering, the comment about smiles. This was someone who knew me. I agreed, decided to make a list of everyone who might have it in for me. That evening, leaving the gallery, I immediately noticed him. The clown stood on the opposite side of the street, under a lamppost, holding a red balloon in his hand. He wasn't moving, just standing, looking at me. My first instinct was to run. But where? Back to the gallery? I'd already activated the alarm. Besides, the clown wasn't doing anything threatening. He was just standing there. Gathering all my courage, I took out my phone, took several pictures of the clown. If he was stalking me, I would have evidence. Then I turned and quickly headed to the subway station, constantly looking over my shoulder. The clown didn't follow me. He remained standing under the lamppost, watching me leave. Returning home, I began looking through the photos I had taken. They showed a tall man in a classic clown costume, large red pom-poms instead of buttons. His face was completely covered with white makeup, bright red smile, black triangles around his eyes. He wasn't wearing a wig. Instead, his own dark hair was slicked back. Something in his posture, in the tilt of his head, seemed vaguely familiar. But no matter how much I peered at the photos, I couldn't figure out who it could be. That night, I dreamed of clowns again, but this time, there was only one clown. The very one from the photos. He stood in the corner of my bedroom, holding a red balloon, watching me sleep. At some point, he leaned toward me, whispered that I'd broken his heart, and now he would break mine. I woke up screaming, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was empty. No clowns. But the dream left behind an oppressive feeling. This wasn't just stalking. This was revenge. But for what? The next morning I sat down with a notebook, began making a list of people who might have it in for me. Jason, my ex, was first on the list, though it seemed unlikely. Our breakup was unpleasant, but not dramatic enough to cause such strange revenge. Besides, he'd moved to Chicago a month ago. Next were several classmates with whom I'd had minor conflicts. Lisa, who accused me of plagiarizing her idea for a sculpture project. Mike, who was dissatisfied with my criticism of his work during a group discussion. But none of them seemed like the type capable of such stalking. Then I remembered someone else. A strange gallery visitor who had come several times over the past month. A tall, thin man, always in the same gray coat. He never spoke to me, just stood for long periods in front of certain exhibits, sometimes making notes in a small notebook. There was something elusive and disturbing about him, but I couldn't say exactly what. The list turned out short and unconvincing. None of these people had a strong enough motive. Maybe I should dig deeper. Go back to the past, to high school or even earlier. I opened my laptop and logged into my Facebook account, scrolled through my friends list. Many were former classmates. I hadn't seen most of them in years. It was hard to imagine that any of them harbored such a deep grudge. But then my attention was drawn to a name I had almost forgotten. Eric Foster, a quiet boy from a parallel class who had attended high school with me. I clicked on his profile. There were no photos or posts from recent years. The last post was dated 2013, the year of our graduation. Eric. I vaguely remembered him. A thin, awkward guy with a perpetually downcast gaze. He rarely spoke to anyone, preferred to keep to himself. I couldn't remember us having any conflicts. In fact, I barely remembered us ever talking at all. But something made me linger on his page, something important that I couldn't remember. I began looking through his old photos. In most of them, he was alone, sometimes with a woman who, judging by the resemblance, was his mother. In one photo, they stood in front of a circus tent. The caption read, "Mom at work. Proud of her." Circus. Something clicked in my memory. Eric's mother worked in a circus. I think she was a makeup artist or costume designer. Eric sometimes brought photos of clowns and acrobats to school. I continued scrolling through his page. Then I came across a post from February 14th, 2013. Valentine's Day of our senior year. Eric had published a poem. It wasn't addressed specifically to me, but I suddenly remembered that on that day, he had approached me in the school hallway, handed me an envelope. Inside was the same poem, handwritten, and a small note in which he confessed his feelings. I remembered how I laughed. not at him, from the awkwardness of the situation. But my friends, who were nearby, weren't so kind. They snatched the poem from my hands, began reading it aloud, mocking every line. Eric stood there, his face getting redder and redder, until finally he snatched the paper and ran away. I didn't go after him, didn't apologize, just continued my day, quickly forgetting about the incident. But now, looking at the same poem on the screen, I felt a pang of shame. We were cruel, as only teenagers can be cruel, not understanding what pain their actions can cause. After this incident, Eric became even more withdrawn. A few weeks later, he stopped coming to school altogether. I heard rumors that he had transferred to another school, but never found out for sure. He just disappeared from my life, becoming another forgotten face from the past. But what if he hadn't forgotten? What if, over the years, his resentment had turned into something dark and dangerous? I began searching for information about him on the internet, added the name of our city and school. Then I remembered his mother's name, Linda Foster. A search for Linda Foster Circus gave several results, including an old article in the local newspaper about the Star Arena Circus tour in our city in 2012. The article mentioned Linda Foster, the circus's chief makeup artist. I searched for information about Star Arena Circus, discovered that it had ceased to exist in 2014 due to financial problems. What happened to Linda and Eric after that was unclear. Further searching led me to an article in the local newspaper from September 2013. Just a few months after our graduation, it reported on a suicide attempt by an unnamed teenager. He was found with a slit throat in his room. The teenager survived thanks to his mother's quick intervention, but suffered serious injuries requiring long-term treatment. The article didn't mention names, but indicated that the incident occurred in the same area where Eric lived. Coincidence? Possibly. But something told me it was him. If Eric really tried to kill himself after that incident at school, if he survived but was left with a scar on his throat, this could explain his disappearance, and possibly his current obsession with me. He could blame me for what happened. This thought made me shudder. Could my thoughtless cruelty at school have led to such a terrible result? And now, years later, had Eric returned to take revenge? After several more searches, I found mention of Linda Foster in the employee list of the Wonderland Children's Entertainment Center. She was listed as head of the costume and makeup department. Wonderland was a large indoor amusement park for children, with rides, game zones, and regular performances by entertainers in fairy tale character costumes, including, probably, clowns. Could it be that Eric worked there with his mother? This would explain access to professional makeup and a clown costume. I decided to visit Wonderland the next day, not to confront Eric if he really worked there, but to confirm my suspicions. If I saw him there, I would know for sure that he was my stalker, and then I could decide what to do next. Wonderland turned out to be exactly what I expected. Bright, noisy, full of children. I bought an entrance ticket and headed straight to the circus arena. 3 clowns were performing on a small stage. One was short and fat. The second was an elderly man with gray hair, and the third was tall and thin, with dark hair slicked back. His movements were smooth and graceful. I took several photos, compared them with shots of the clown who had been stalking me. The makeup was different, but something in the posture was similar. When the show ended, the tall clown handed out red balloons to children, exactly the same as those I had found at my door. Noticing me, he froze, then quickly disappeared behind a door marked staff only. I followed him, but in the corridor with several doors, the clown disappeared from sight. While I stood indecisively in front of the dressing room, a middle-aged woman came out of the door opposite. She asked in surprise what I was doing in the staff area. Making up a story about a lost purse, I asked if Eric Foster worked here. The woman introduced herself as his mother, Linda. She confirmed that Eric worked as an entertainer. She said he was changing after the performance, asked if I wanted to wait for him. I replied that I had little time, but I learned that today he worked until closing. Now I had confirmation of my suspicions, but I still didn't understand Eric's motives. Why was he stalking me 4 years after school? And why did he choose such a creepy method? I decided to return in the evening, talk to him directly. Perhaps it was risky, but I was tired of living in fear. After work at the gallery, I returned to Wonderland, waited at the staff exit. The center was almost empty. The last visitors were heading for the exit. Staff members left the building one by one. Finally, Linda appeared with a tall young man, Eric. He wore a dark jacket and jeans. His dark hair was slicked back. Even from a distance, a scar was visible. It stretched from his throat to the corner of his mouth, creating the impression of a distorted smile. I gathered my courage and approached them. Linda noticed me first, smiled with recognition, introduced me to Eric as a girl from his school. Eric turned to me. I saw a moment of recognition in his eyes, replaced by something dark and cold. He didn't look surprised, rather expectant. Linda said she needed to go back inside for her forgotten phone. She left us alone, promised to return in a minute. As soon as she left, Eric's facial expression changed. The cold mask fell away. I saw something in his eyes that could only be hatred. He admitted that it was him. The clown at the station, the balloons, the notes, all this time. I tried to explain that I was sorry about what happened at school. We were children. I was cruel. But it was 4 years ago. I didn't understand why he was stalking me now in this way. Eric told me what happened after that day. After my friends and I mocked him, he tried to kill himself, cut his throat. His mother found him in time. Doctors saved his life, but couldn't completely fix the scar. Now he always had a smile, like a clown. I expressed regret, but noted that stalking me wouldn't change the past, wouldn't heal his wounds. Eric agreed, but said it would make me feel what he felt. Fear, helplessness, the feeling that someone was watching, evaluating, laughing. I noticed his hand slide into his jacket pocket, tensed. Eric slowly pulled out his hand. It held a small folding knife with a gleaming blade. He admitted that he wanted to cause me physical pain, to match the emotional pain I had caused him. He imagined leaving a scar on my face, the same as his. But now, he said, he wasn't sure that was what he wanted. I spoke gently. What happened to him was terrible. I played a role in it. I was cruel and thoughtless. But causing me pain wouldn't heal him. It would only make him the same as those who caused him pain. Eric looked at me for a long time, then slowly folded the knife, put it in his pocket. He said that perhaps I was right, but added that this wasn't the end. The next time I saw a red balloon, I should remember. He would always be nearby, watching. With these words, he walked away, left me standing alone in the empty parking lot. I immediately called the police, reported the stalking and threats. This time, I had concrete facts. The stalker's name, a knife threat, his own confession. Officers advised me to file for a restraining order, not to stay alone. I accepted Megan's offer to spend the night at her place. Her apartment was in a modern building with security and video surveillance. I felt safer there. In the morning, I woke up with the feeling that something was wrong. Turning my head to the window, I saw a red balloon tied to the outside of the glass. A card was attached to the string. The message said we would meet face to face soon, and then I would remember him. We lived on the 7th floor. Someone had to climb the fire escape or descend from the roof to tie a balloon to the window. Megan called the police, but they found no signs of break-in. Officers advised us to leave the apartment immediately. We decided to go to Megan's parents in the suburbs. On the way, I noticed a dark sedan following our taxi. Megan asked the driver to make several unexpected turns, but the sedan continued to follow us. Megan called the police. The dispatcher advised heading to the nearest station. When we were almost at our destination, the sedan sharply cut us off, forced us to stop. Eric got out of the car, with a knife in his hand. The driver locked the doors. We ducked down. Eric knocked on the glass with the knife handle, demanded that I come out. At that moment, sirens sounded. Police were rapidly approaching. Eric rushed to his car and disappeared. At the station, I was issued a temporary restraining order. Police sent a patrol to Eric's house, but didn't find him there. His mother was concerned about her son's disappearance, cooperated with authorities. I decided to temporarily go to my parents in another state. On the day of departure, Megan and her father took me to the airport. After passing security, I felt some relief. At the departure gate, I sat with a magazine, trying to distract myself. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't notice someone sit next to me, until I heard a familiar voice. Slowly looking up, I saw Eric. He was dressed normally, no makeup or costume, only the scar, creating the impression of a permanent smile. He explained that he found me through Megan's Instagram post with the airport geotag. I reminded him that police were looking for him. There was security everywhere. Eric smiled, said he never wanted to cause me physical harm. He wanted me to feel what he felt. Fear, helplessness, constant observation. And he had achieved his goal. Then Eric said something unexpected. He wasn't letting me go. The revenge he had planned for 4 years hadn't brought him the expected relief. He was still broken, still bore scars. My fear hadn't changed any of that. But he realized something. Fear wasn't enough. He needed me to understand. Really understand. What it felt like to wear a mask you couldn't remove. He reached into his pocket. I tensed, ready to scream. But he didn't pull out a knife. He pulled out a small vial, clear liquid inside. He said it was acid. Not strong enough to kill, but strong enough to leave scars. Permanent scars. Like his. He wanted me to wear a smile I couldn't take off. Just like him. I tried to stand, to run. But Eric grabbed my wrist. His grip was iron. Security was 20 meters away. People were everywhere. But Eric didn't care anymore. He unscrewed the cap of the vial. I screamed, loud enough that heads turned. Security started running toward us. Eric smiled. That permanent, scarred smile. He said this was for every laugh, every mocking word, every smile I'd given to others while destroying him. He raised the vial. Security tackled him before the acid touched my face. The vial flew from his hand, shattered on the floor. The liquid hissed as it ate into the tile. They pinned Eric to the ground, put him in handcuffs, led him away. He looked back at me once, still smiling, that horrible, permanent smile, and he mouthed 3 words. I could read his lips clearly. Next time, Alexa. Eric Foster was charged with attempted assault with a deadly weapon, stalking, violation of a restraining order. His lawyer tried to plead insanity, argued that years of bullying and a failed suicide attempt had damaged his mental state. The prosecution argued that his actions were calculated, methodical. He'd planned this for months, maybe years. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Eric was sentenced to 8 years in prison. I testified, told the court everything. The balloons, the notes, the chase, the acid. When I finished, Eric's lawyer asked me one question. Did I remember what happened on Valentine's Day 2013? I said yes. I remembered. He asked if I felt responsible for Eric's suicide attempt. I said yes, partially. He asked if I'd ever apologized. I said no. I hadn't. The lawyer sat down. The judge delivered the verdict. 8 years. Eric would be eligible for parole in 5. That was 2 years ago. Eric Foster is still in prison. I moved to a different city, changed my phone number, deleted all social media. I thought I was safe, thought I could finally move on. But last week, a package arrived at my new address. No return address. Just my name in neat block letters. Inside was a red balloon, deflated, and a card. The message said he was counting down the days, that in 3 years, he'd be free, that he remembered every one of my smiles, and that next time, security wouldn't be fast enough. I called the police. They said there was nothing they could do. The package wasn't a direct threat, just a balloon and a note. I asked about extending his sentence. They said he'd been a model prisoner, good behavior, attending therapy. He'd likely get parole. In 3 years. I sit in my apartment now. The door has 5 locks, security cameras in every room, pepper spray in every pocket. But I know it won't be enough, because Eric Foster has spent 8 years in prison. 8 years with nothing to do but plan. Remember, perfect is revenge, and when he gets out, he'll come for me. Not with a knife, not with acid, with something worse. Something I can't imagine yet. Because the scariest thing about Eric isn't his scar, isn't his obsession. It's his patience. He can wait. He's proven that. And in 3 years, when he walks out of that prison, I'll be waiting too. Waiting for the day when I see a red balloon. And know that this time, there's no escape. Because some smiles hide more than pain. They hide promises, and Eric Foster always keeps his promises. The countdown has begun. 3 years, 1,095 days, and then the smile mask comes off.
When I got laid off from TechFlow Solutions on a Friday afternoon, I knew my life in Austin was about to change dramatically. Because at 26 years old, I was a programmer with 3 years of experience who was suddenly jobless. And my savings would last maybe 2 months of rent. Sitting in my studio, I opened the Roomie app on my phone, which over the past few years had become the main way to find a roommate in big cities. And I created an account, uploaded a photo, and wrote that I was a programmer looking for housing in Austin who was clean, quiet, and working from home. Within an hour, I got a message from user EthanLiving24. And the photo showed a smiling guy about my age with short dark hair, while his profile was impressive. UT business school student, into fitness and photography, non-smoker, no parties, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars rating and positive reviews from previous roommates. His message said he was looking for a roommate for a 2-bedroom apartment at Cedar Park Heights complex with rent of $1,200 split in half, which was exactly what I needed. $600 a month instead of $2,000 for a studio. We exchanged several messages, and Ethan seemed serious and responsible, explaining his previous roommate had moved due to relocating to another city. The apartment had been vacant for 2 weeks. He didn't want to search long and was ready to sign a lease quickly. We agreed to meet the next day. Cedar Park Heights complex was located 20 minutes from downtown, with modern 3-story red brick buildings, manicured lawns, a small pool and fitness center, and the parking lot had mostly new cars. Ethan was waiting for me at the entrance to Building C, dressed in an athletic shirt and jeans with an iPhone in his hand. And up close, he looked even younger than in the photo. Maybe 24 at most, with an athletic build and confident demeanor. The second-floor apartment exceeded my expectations with a spacious living room with large windows, a modern kitchen with granite countertops, 2 bedrooms with separate bathrooms, built-in closets, and furniture that was stylish but not too expensive. Ethan showed me his room with its neatly made bed, modern desk with a MacBook Pro, shelf with marketing and finance textbooks, and walls decorated with motivational posters and professional travel photos. My future room was empty but spacious, with a large window facing the complex's inner courtyard, a built-in closet, and my own bathroom with shower. While we toured the apartment, Ethan told me about himself, explaining he was a second-year MBA student at UT who worked part-time in social media as an influencer, promoted athletic wear and healthy eating brands, and his Instagram had about 15,000 followers, with mostly photos from the gym, trendy cafes, and scenic Austin spots. He mentioned that he often traveled for school and brand work, and spent weekends in other cities for photo shoots and events, which meant I'd often be alone in the apartment. And this suited me, because it meant more quiet for working on projects. At the management office, they checked my credit history and income statement, and my credit score was good, while the salary statement met requirements. So deposit plus first month totaled $2,400, which was almost all my savings. But I had housing in a good neighborhood and time to find new work. Ethan paid his portion in cash, which seemed strange, but he explained he'd gotten money from a recent advertising campaign, and the lease was standard with 1 year and a renewal option. Moving took just 1 day because my belongings fit in a small truck, and Ethan helped carry boxes while being friendly and talkative. The first evening we ordered pizza and watched a Netflix movie, and Ethan turned out to be a good conversationalist who talked about his post-MBA plans and dreams of his own business and social marketing. In the first days, I focused on settling in and job hunting by setting up a home office and sending resumes to dozens of companies. And freelance projects started bringing in some money. Ethan appeared at home rarely, usually late evenings and leaving early mornings, because he had a busy schedule with university classes, meetings with potential partners, and photo shoots for brands. He was very active on social media because every day new posts appeared on his Instagram showing morning coffee at trendy cafes, workouts at the gym, and dinner at popular restaurants, while stories updated several times daily, and TikTok showed short videos about student life and productivity tips. His content was high quality and professional, with photos that had good composition and lighting, and subscriber comments were positive. After 2 weeks, I noticed the first oddities. Wednesday evening, Ethan mentioned he was going to Houston for the weekend for his younger sister's birthday, and I wished him a good time. Thursday morning, while checking Instagram over breakfast, I saw Ethan's story showing breakfast at Mozart's Cafe on Lake Austin, with a beautifully arranged photo of avocado toast and cappuccino. And the publication time was 8:30 a.m. I was home working in the living room, and Ethan's car, a gray Honda Civic, was in its spot, while the apartment was completely quiet and his bedroom was locked. I chalked it up to scheduled posts because modern social networks allow planning posts in advance, and many influencers use this function. But something told me that strange things were beginning to happen. By the end of the first month, I began to understand Ethan's rhythm of life, because he was always connected and constantly creating content, living between the real and digital worlds. My own life was slowly getting back on track as freelance projects brought stable income. And I worked on website redesigns, created mobile apps, and fixed bugs in existing systems. Wednesday evening, Ethan walked through the living room with a travel bag and looked tired, mentioning he was going to his parents in Houston because his little sister was graduating high school, and there was a family celebration, and he'd be back Sunday evening. I wished him a good time, and Ethan nodded and left. Thursday passed quietly as I worked on a new project, ordered food through DoorDash, and watched a Netflix series. Around 9 p.m., I decided to check social media. Ethan's stories had a new publication showing a dinner photo at Uchiko Restaurant, one of Austin's most expensive sushi bars, with a beautifully arranged sashimi plate, sake glass, and candles in the background. And the caption read, "Date night vibes," with publication time of 8:15 p.m. I frowned because Uchiko was in downtown Austin, a half-hour drive from our apartment, and Ethan was supposed to be in Houston, 3 hours away. But his car wasn't in the parking lot. I opened TikTok and saw a new video from his account posted an hour ago showing a short clip from Orange Theory Gym on Barton Springs with treadmill footage, quick exercise cuts, and a motivational caption about consistency, while geolocation clearly showed Austin, Texas. Maybe he had a one-day trip or family plans changed, but I didn't think much of it. Friday morning, someone knocked on the door, and I opened it to see a girl about my age with chestnut hair and a neat bun, dressed in a business suit and holding a Starbucks coffee cup. She apologized for bothering me and introduced herself as Mia from downstairs, asking if I'd seen Ethan because they had planned to meet yesterday evening, but he didn't show up and wasn't answering messages. I explained the situation that Ethan was supposed to be in Houston. Mia looked concerned because she'd seen his stories from Uchiko last night and thought he'd changed his mind about visiting his parents. We stood in the doorway exchanging puzzled looks, and Mia turned out to be a data analyst at a local bank who was used to details, and her concern seemed justified. I suggested she come in so we could try to figure this out. We sat at the kitchen island while I brewed coffee. Mia explained they'd met a month ago in the complex gym where he helped her with a machine, and they got talking. And it turned out they had a lot in common because both loved hiking, were interested in photography, and followed healthy eating. They'd gone out a few times, nothing serious, just had a good time, and he was interesting and ambitious and knew a lot about marketing and business. But sometimes he seemed secretive, dodging questions about family, about the past, and about post-MBA plans. Yesterday, they'd planned to go to a movie at Alamo Drafthouse, and Ethan suggested meeting at 7 p.m. So she came on time, waited an hour, and sent messages with no response before she saw his story from the restaurant and thought he just changed his mind. We both took out our phones and opened Ethan's social media. Instagram showed activity Friday morning too, with breakfast at Joe's Coffee, a workout, and several stories from the university campus, while TikTok had a new video about a productive morning for an MBA student. Everything looked normal if you didn't know Ethan was supposed to be in Houston. Mia asked if I'd checked his room. I shook my head because Ethan hadn't given me keys to his bedroom, and we respected each other's privacy. But the situation was becoming serious enough to break that rule. I got up and went to Ethan's door, tried the handle, which was locked, and knocked with no answer. Mia suggested we call the apartment manager to get a spare key and say we were worried about Ethan's health. The manager, a middle-aged woman, arrived 20 minutes later and looked skeptical about our concerns but agreed to open the door. Ethan's room looked exactly as I remembered, with a neatly made bed, clean desk,
and clothes hung in the closet, but closer examination revealed signs of hasty departure. The desk drawer was slightly open, and inside were several documents including printed bank statements showing regular transfers of large sums to Ethan's account, $2,000 to $3,000 every few days, with transfer sources listed as various LLCs with anonymous names. Mia studied the documents with professional interest and said these companies looked fictitious, with names too generic and addresses leading to mailboxes, which was a classic money laundering scheme. In another drawer, I found several USB drives and an external hard drive. And connecting them to my laptop, I discovered archives with thousands of Ethan's photos from the past 2 years, with images sorted by categories like food, gym, travel, and selfies. Many photos I'd seen in his recent publications, though they were taken months ago. I told Mia that someone was definitely using this archive to maintain his account activity. Under the mattress, we found an envelope with cash, about $3,000 in small bills, and nearby lay a note in Ethan's handwriting saying, "For a rainy day, if something goes wrong." The most disturbing find was a second phone hidden in a shoebox in the closet. An old iPhone with a cracked screen but still working. It contained messages from unknown numbers that were full of threats and demands. The messages said things like, "You know the rules, keep playing the role, and your reputation is our asset, don't forget that, and one wrong move and everyone will know the truth about your income." The last message came the day Ethan disappeared and said, "Meeting time changed. Eastside Warehouse, 11 p.m. Come alone." Mia photographed all messages and documents because we finally had concrete evidence. We drove to the police station, this time with real proof. The detective who took our statement was a woman about 40, with sharp eyes and a professional demeanor who listened carefully, took notes, and asked detailed questions. She said this matched a pattern they'd been investigating because several young people with popular social media accounts had disappeared over recent months. Their profiles continued to be active, but they themselves didn't appear anywhere. She explained they suspected an organized group that specialized in exploiting social media influencers by kidnapping people with large audiences, forcing them to hand over account passwords, and then using their reputation for fraud. The detective said our evidence was valuable, and she'd open an official investigation immediately, while coordinating with FBI Cybercrimes Division. She warned us to be careful because these people were dangerous and had already killed to protect their operation. We left the station with mixed feelings of relief that authorities were finally involved, but fear for what might be happening to Ethan. 2 days later, the detective called and said they'd raided the Eastside Warehouse based on our evidence. I asked if they found Ethan. There was a long pause on the line. The detective said they found several people, young men and women, all with popular social media accounts, all reported missing over the past 6 months, but Ethan wasn't among them. They found his body in a separate room where he'd been dead for at least 10 days, with cause of death being blunt force trauma to the head. The detective's voice was gentle as she explained that based on the condition of the body and evidence at the scene, they believed Ethan was killed shortly after he arrived at the warehouse, probably when he tried to resist or escape. Everything after that, all the Instagram posts, all the TikTok videos, all the stories, had been created by the criminals using his photo archive. We'd been chasing a ghost, a digital ghost that looked alive because someone kept posting in his name. I hung up the phone and sat in the empty apartment where Ethan's room was still locked, his belongings still there, and his car still missing from the parking lot. But Ethan was gone, and had been gone for weeks while I lived here, while I ate breakfast in the kitchen where he'd stood, and while I walked past his door thinking he was just traveling. The funeral was small with Ethan's parents, his younger sister, a few university friends, and Mia and I in attendance, while Jessica, his ex-girlfriend, stood in the back crying silently. His Instagram account was still active because someone had posted a photo that morning showing sunrise over Lake Austin with a caption about new beginnings. The police shut it down that afternoon, but by then hundreds of people had liked it, commented on it, and shared it,
not knowing they were interacting with a dead man's account. The investigation continued for months as they arrested several members of the criminal network, freed other hostages, and shut down the data center operation. But the leaders escaped and disappeared to other countries, beyond reach of U.S. law enforcement. And Ethan's killers were never identified, remaining just unnamed members of a larger organization, faces in a crowd that were impossible to track. I moved out of the apartment a month after the funeral because I couldn't stay in a place where my roommate had been dead the whole time. I thought he was just busy. Mia and I stayed in touch, but the relationship that had started during our search for Ethan couldn't survive the weight of what we'd found. Sometimes I still check social media and see accounts of people I don't know, posting perfect photos and living perfect digital lives. And I wonder how many of them are real and how many are ghosts. Digital ghosts maintained by people who killed the person behind the smile. Ethan's last real post was 2 weeks before he disappeared. A sunset photo from Mount Bonnell with a caption about being grateful for every moment. I think about that post often and about how he didn't know those moments were running out. That in 2 weeks he'd be dead and his digital life would continue without him. The scariest thing about the modern world isn't that people can disappear, but that they can keep existing online long after they're gone. Ethan Markovich died alone in a warehouse, killed for his Instagram followers, for his TikTok engagement, and for his digital reputation that could be monetized. And for 10 days, no one noticed because his accounts kept posting, kept smiling, and kept pretending everything was fine. I learned something from Ethan's death. That the person behind the perfect feed might not be who you think, and might not even be alive. And that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can have is a large following. Because someone, somewhere, might decide you're worth more dead than alive, as long as they can keep your account running. Ethan's Instagram finally went dark 6 months after his death, when his parents requested it be shut down permanently. But I still see his face sometimes in my recommended follows, in ads, and in sponsored posts. The algorithm doesn't know he's dead, but just knows his engagement rates were good. And in the digital world, that's all that matters. Last week I got a message on Roomy app from a new user with a perfect profile, great photos, and excellent reviews. Looking for a roommate in Austin with rent split in half. Too good to be true. I deleted the app, because I know now that some deals are too good to be true. And some roommates never really leave. They just stop breathing while their digital life goes on.
My grandfather Antonio died on All Saints' Eve, exactly 50 years after he fled Italy. He was found in his study, slumped over his desk, rosary beads clutched in one hand, and a small stone figurine in the other. The coroner said it was a heart attack, but I saw his face. Whatever killed him, it wasn't just his heart that stopped. It was fear. I'm Marco Rossi, 32 years old, divorced, no kids. I work as an accountant in Boston, live alone in a small apartment, and until 3 months ago, I thought my life was ordinary, boring even. My biggest concerns were meeting deadlines and whether I'd have time to hit the gym after work. Then I inherited the figurine. Grandfather had tried to tell me about it once, on my 18th birthday. He'd pulled me into his study, a room that always smelled of old books and grappa, and started talking about his past in Italy. About Mussolini, fascist militias, a secret prison in Calabria. I'd been 18 and stupid, more interested in the party my friends were throwing than in old man's stories. I'd nodded politely, promised to listen another time, and left. There was no other time. After the funeral, I found a letter in his safe, addressed to me. Inside was the figurine wrapped in black cloth, and 3 pages of cramped handwriting. I almost threw it away. Almost. Instead, I read it that night, sitting in my empty apartment with a bottle of whiskey I couldn't afford. Grandfather wrote that in 1927, at 19 years old, he'd been a guard at a fascist prison in southern Italy. Not a regular prison, a place where people disappeared. Political enemies, heretics, cult leaders. The regime's dirty secret hidden in the mountains where no one asked questions. In October of that year, they brought in a prisoner everyone called the Nameless One. Tall, skeletal, with black hair down to his shoulders and eyes so dark they looked like holes in his face. He'd been the leader of a mountain cult that practiced old rituals, pre-Christian ceremonies the church wanted erased. When they asked his name for the registry, he smiled and said he had no name. They beat him. He kept smiling. They put him in solitary confinement in the deepest part of the prison. Grandfather was assigned night guard duty outside his cell. The Nameless One never screamed, never begged, never complained. He just sat in the darkness, staring at the wall as if he could see through it. After a few weeks, the warden worried he was going insane. Mad prisoners were trouble. They disrupted order, made noise, required extra supervision. So they asked what he wanted. Books, cards, something to pass the time. He asked for a stone the size of a fist and a strip of sandpaper. It seemed harmless. They gave him what he wanted. He began to carve. Grandfather watched him work every night during rounds. Methodical, patient, rubbing stone against sandpaper, hour after hour. Slowly, a shape emerged. A human figure, small enough to fit in a palm. And as the figurine took form, things began to happen. Prisoners who'd been docile for years suddenly started fights. Guards became more violent, more paranoid. The weather turned. Heavy clouds settled over the prison, and the temperature dropped despite it being autumn. Rats died in the corridors for no reason. Shadows moved on their own. One old guard, a Sicilian named Salvatore, pulled Grandfather aside and warned him. He'd seen this kind of thing in the mountains where he grew up. Old magic, old powers, the kind that shouldn't exist but did. Grandfather tried to dismiss it as superstition, but every night, passing that cell, he felt something. A coldness that had nothing to do with temperature, a presence that made his skin crawl. By late October, the prison was on the edge of chaos. Prisoners refused orders. Guards were brutal in response. The warden, desperate to maintain control, offered concessions, extra rations, wine, small privileges. The prisoners demanded freedom instead. It was absurd, impossible. The warden ordered the guards to force them back into their cells. What happened next, Grandfather could barely describe, even in writing. His handwriting became shaky, words crossed out and rewritten. The prisoners didn't just fight, they slaughtered each other. Men who'd been friends for years tore into each other like animals. The guards retreated, barricaded themselves, called for reinforcements that would take hours to arrive. In the chaos, Grandfather remembered the Nameless One. He fought his way through the corridors to the solitary wing. The cell door was open. Inside, a kitchen worker lay dead on the floor, chest cavity torn open as if something had been ripped out with bare hands. The Nameless One was gone. On the small table sat the completed figurine, a perfect miniature human, so detailed it seemed ready to breathe. Next to it lay a piece of paper with a symbol drawn in what looked like blood, a circle with lines radiating outward, and at the center, an eye. Grandfather didn't know why he did it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the figurine's influence. But he took both items and hid them in his uniform. Salvatore found him there, saw the body, Understood immediately. They tried to flee, but a military patrol stopped them on the road and forced them back. By then, the riot had burned itself out. Most prisoners were dead. The survivors sat in their cells like sleepwalkers, remembering nothing. The official report said, prisoner 131 died in the riot, body too mutilated to identify. A convenient lie. But grandfather knew the truth. The nameless one had escaped, and he'd left his work behind. Grandfather deserted a week later, made his way to France, then boarded a ship to America. He brought almost nothing, just clothes, a few photographs, and the figurine he couldn't bring himself to destroy. He tried. Threw it into the ocean off the coast of New York. Woke up the next morning to find it on his nightstand. Buried it in a forest in Vermont. Found it under his pillow 3 days later. Tried to smash it with a hammer. The hammer broke. The figurine didn't even chip, so he kept it locked away and built his life around it. Married my grandmother, had my father, worked as a stonemason. Ironic, he noted in the letter. He went to Mass every Sunday, sprinkled holy water in every corner of his house, wore a rosary around his neck even when he slept, not because he was devout, because he was terrified. The figurine never left him alone. Sometimes he'd wake to find it moved, placed somewhere he'd see it first thing in the morning. Sometimes he'd hear whispers in the night, too quiet to understand but insistent. Sometimes he'd see a shadow in the corner of his vision, tall, thin, with long black hair. The nameless one, watching, waiting. Grandfather's letter ended with a warning. The figurine couldn't be destroyed, couldn't be lost, couldn't be given away. It would always return. And on All Saints' Eve, when the boundary between worlds grew thin, it would try to complete what it had started. He wrote that he didn't know what the figurine was meant to do. A vessel for something, a door to somewhere. But he knew it was unfinished. The nameless one had been interrupted before he could activate it with the symbol. The letter's final line was underlined 3 times. Never let the figurine touch the symbol. Never bring them together. If you do, he will come through. I finished reading at 3 a.m, drunk and unsettled. I looked at the figurine sitting on my coffee table. Just a carved stone, smooth and gray, depicting a human figure with its arms raised. Skillfully made, but nothing supernatural about it. I laughed at myself for being spooked by an old man's paranoid fantasy. Grandfather had been 19 when he worked at that prison. Young, impressionable, probably traumatized by what he'd seen. The fascist regime had committed real horrors. No need to invent supernatural ones. I put the figurine on my bookshelf and went to bed. That was 3 months ago. At first, nothing happened. I went to work, came home, lived my life. The figurine sat on the shelf gathering dust. Then small things started. I'd leave it on the bookshelf, come home to find it on the kitchen counter. I'd put it back, wake up to find it on my nightstand. I told myself I was moving it in my sleep, stress from work making me forgetful. Then I started hearing things. Whispers at night, too quiet to make out words. Footsteps in my apartment when I was alone. The feeling of being watched. I tried to throw the figurine away. Put it in a dumpster 3 blocks from my apartment. Found it in my bathroom sink the next morning. Took it to my office and left it in a drawer. It was back in my apartment before I got home. I stopped trying after that. Just kept it and tried to ignore the growing sense that something was building. That whatever had been waiting 50 years was running out of patience. Last week I started having dreams. The same dream every night. I'm in a stone corridor, torches flickering on the walls. I'm walking towards something, though I don't want to. My body moves without my control. At the end of the corridor is a cell with an open door. Inside, a figure sits in darkness. Tall, thin, with long black hair covering its face. It looks up. Its eyes are black holes. It smiles. And it speaks in a voice like grinding stone. Says I have what's his. I wake up sweating, heart hammering. The figurine is always closer than where I left it. On my dresser, on my desk, on my pillow. Yesterday was October 30th. I called in sick to work. Couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except the figurine and grandfather's warning. Tonight is All Saints' Eve. I'm sitting at my desk at 11 p.m. The figurine sits in front of me. I've been staring at it for an hour, trying to decide what to do. I found the symbol this morning. It was in grandfather's safe, tucked in an envelope I'd missed before. The same symbol from his letter, a circle with radiating lines and an eye at the center, drawn on old yellowed paper and faded ink that might be blood. Grandfather's warning echoes in my mind. Never bring them together. But I'm tired. Tired of the whispers, the dreams, the feeling of being hunted. Tired of living in fear like grandfather did for 50 years. Maybe if I bring them together, it will end. Maybe the nameless one will come through and finish whatever he started, and I'll finally be free. Or maybe I'll doom myself to something worse than death. I don't know anymore. The clock just struck midnight. All Saints' Eve has become All Saints' Day. The boundary is thin. I can feel it now. The air in my apartment has changed. Heavier. Colder. Like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. I'm holding the symbol in one hand and the figurine in the other. They're both warm, almost hot. The figurine is vibrating slightly like it's alive, pulsing with something that feels like a heartbeat. I can hear something now. Not whispers. Footsteps. In my apartment. Getting closer. Heavy, deliberate steps that echo despite my carpeted floor. My hands are shaking. I'm bringing them together. The symbol and the figurine. Just to see. Just to know if grandfather was right, or if this is all elaborate delusion. The paper is touching the stone now. The figurine is burning hot. The symbol is glowing. Actually glowing. A sickly green light that shouldn't be possible. That hurts to look at directly. The footsteps stopped. Right outside my study door. The door is opening. I didn't touch it. It's opening on its own, slowly. The hinges creaking in a way they never have before. I see him. Tall. Thin. Long black hair hanging like a curtain. Eyes like holes punched through reality into somewhere else. Somewhere dark and cold and endless. He's smiling. The same smile grandfather described. Not cruel. Not kind. Just knowing. Like he's been waiting for this moment for 50 years and knew it would come. He's reaching for me with hands that are too long, fingers that are too thin. His skin is gray like stone, like he's carved from the same material as the figurine. His hand touches mine. Cold. So cold it burns. Like touching dry ice. Like touching death itself. He's speaking, but I can't understand the words. An old language, older than Latin, older than anything I've heard. The sounds hurt my ears, make my teeth ache, make something deep in my brain scream that I shouldn't be hearing this. The figurine is moving in my hand, shifting, changing. The stone is softening, becoming something else. Something organic, something alive. Oh God, it's not a figurine. It's a body, a compressed body. All the people from the prison, all the souls from the riot, pressed into stone. A vessel. A door made of human suffering. I can see their faces now emerging from the stone. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Screaming silently. And I just opened it. He's pulling me toward it. Toward the figurine that's now a writhing mass of stone and flesh and screaming faces. I'm trying to fight, but I can't move. His grip is absolute. My muscles won't respond. I understand now. This is what grandfather feared. Not death. Not even damnation. Becoming part of it. Another face in the stone. Another soul compressed into the vessel. Fuel for whatever ritual the nameless one was performing. Whatever door he was trying to open. Forever. The figurine is expanding, opening like a mouth. I can see them inside more clearly now. Grandfather. Salvatore. All the prisoners from the riot. All the others who touched it over the years. Their mouths open in eternal screams. their hands reaching, clawing, desperate. They're pulling me in. I'm at the edge now. The boundary between flesh and stone, between life and whatever this is. I can feel myself changing. My hand is hardening, turning gray. The sensation is spreading up my arm like ice, crystallizing in my veins. Not painful. Worse than painful. Like being erased. Like becoming nothing and everything at once. He's still smiling. The nameless one. He's saying something. I understand it now. The language is in my head, translating itself directly into thought. He says this is the price. For taking what was his. For breaking the ritual. For 50 years of waiting. He says I'm the last. The vessel is complete now. The door can finally open. He can finally bring through what he's been serving all these years. What's been waiting on the other side since before Rome, before Greece, before humanity built its first stone temple. I'm trying to scream, but my throat is stone. My chest is stone. I can't breathe, but I don't need to. The dead don't breathe. I'm inside now. Part of the figurine. I can feel the others around me pressed against me, merged with me. Grandfather is here. He's trying to warn me, but it's too late. It's been too late since I touched the symbol. Since I inherited the figurine. Since Grandfather took it from that cell 50 years ago. The nameless one is placing the figurine on my desk. Setting it down gently, almost reverently, like a priest placing a relic on an altar. He's leaving, walking back through my apartment. His footsteps echo differently now, like they're coming from far away and very close at the same time. Opening the front door, stepping out into the Boston night. He's free now, after 50 years of being bound to the figurine, of following it wherever it went, of waiting for someone to complete the ritual. And I'm trapped. I can see my apartment from inside the stone, can see my body slumped in the chair, gray and lifeless, already beginning to crumble to dust. Can see the figurine on the desk, one more face added to its surface. My face. Mouth open in a scream that will never end. I can feel the others now. All of us compressed together in this impossible space. Grandfather is here. He's not speaking, but I can feel his thoughts. His regret. His warning that came too late. His love for me twisted now into something that tastes like ash. He says the figurine will find someone new now. Someone will inherit it. Someone will be curious. Someone will find the symbol and bring them together, and the vessel will grow, until whatever is on the other side decides it's ready, until the door opens wide enough, until it comes through. I'm trying to move, but I can't. Trying to scream, but I have no voice. I'm stone, cold and gray and eternal. And I'm aware, fully, horribly aware. Every second stretches into hours, every hour into years. Time moves differently here, in this compressed space between life and death. I can feel them all, every soul trapped in the stone, their fear, their pain, their desperate fading hope that someone will break the figurine and set them free. But no one will, because the figurine can't be broken. Grandfather tried. Others tried. All failed. We are here forever. And somewhere in Boston, the nameless one walks free under the November moon, and the figurine sits on my desk, waiting for the next curious soul to wonder what happens when you bring together a carved stone and an ancient symbol drawn in blood. This is forever. This is my eternity. This is the price of ignoring an old man's warning. And if you're reading this, if somehow this account survived, if someone found it and published it, if you're thinking it's just a story, look around you. Do you have any carved stones? Any old family heirlooms you don't quite understand? Do you hear whispers at night? Do you feel watched? Because the nameless one is still out there, and the vessel is always hungry.